Buongiorno. Aspetta un momento. Hi, this is Father Lou Scurti with Friends of the Word. This is the 25th Sunday of Ordinary Time, and we thank you for joining us. Pass this homily on to your family and friends. Today we focus on Jesus, turning the system upside down, focusing on the relevance, importance of a child amidst our crazy society. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. And contact me, Father Lou Scurti at hotmail.com. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus and his disciples left from there and began a journey through Galilee, but he did not wish anyone to know about it. He was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. After 3 days, his death, the Son of Man will rise." But they did not understand what he was saying. Yet they were afraid to question Jesus. They came to Capernaum, and once inside the house, Jesus began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" They remained silent because they had been discussing among themselves on the way who was the greatest. Then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all, and the servant of all." Then taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and putting his arms around it, he said to them, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me. Whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. Early on in his career as Pope, Francis talked about the need for all of us to be in service to one another, doing the exact opposite of what the apostles were doing today. As a matter of fact, if you remember, on the balcony after his presentation as Pope, he bowed to us, the world, asking us for prayer. So he exemplified in his actions what he was telling us to do and what he will continue telling us to do through his ministry. And we look at the goals of the early church in James's letter, and we see there's a lot of conflict going on. It's more like, my will be done, not your will be done, God. And James is addressing all of that conflict, that jealousy, and the selfish ambition. And as a matter of fact, Francis, our Pope, addressed that same concept when he spoke to the careerists in the church. Now, you're not a careerist, the average layperson is not a careerist, but people in ministry he's referring to as careerists. Not that they're called to fulfill their vocation, but they're called in themselves, as James characterized them, with jealousy and selfish ambition, disorder, foul practices. So he knew that there was a lot of conflict in the church. He knew there was, and he didn't cover it up, God bless him. And he knew there was a lot of intrigue and backbiting in the church among the leaders, cardinals right down to local priest. And he said, an end to that, because you're not here as careerists. Well, that's something new. Well, you heard the apostles. The apostles are walking with Jesus. They're behind Jesus because Jesus is talking and walking and teaching, and they're following him, and he listens, What are they talking about? They quiet up. So he goes home, and he asks them, what were they talking about? And they're embarrassed to say, well, we're arguing who's the most important. Which apostle is going to be more important? I want to line up a whole bunch of priests that I know, and I'll ask them, if they would ask the same question if Jesus were here. Am I important? Are you going to send me to Rome? Are you going to build me a castle? Are you going to do something for me, bishop? Or am I going to become a bishop someday? Am I going to kiss somebody's ring to get, you know what I was going to say, to get ahead? Oh, that doesn't happen among, we see it, priests see it on the inside. And certainly Jorge, our Pope, saw it from the inside. And it must be worse over there. But we have it too. So he addressed us, the priests, but he addressed all of us, the community, because he didn't say, I want the priests to pray for me. He says, I want the world's blessing. He wanted all of us, as he bows down on the night that he's presented to us as our new Pope, Francis, he bows down to us in humility, asking us for prayer. And he knows that he's beginning an upside-down ministry, very much like Jesus. He comes on the scene. He turns things upside down. The ethos of the community in which Jesus is living is being turned upside down. Now, we have a choice. We can either listen to stories of Jesus and say, oh, nice stories, a nice guy, good peripatetic teacher, wonderful first-century prophet, God, who knows what he was, but very nice. Or we can look at the radical Jesus who very seriously turned things upside down nonchalantly, just like Francis is doing in so many ways. He's not going away from the teachings of the church. He's going radically to the root and the heart of the teachings of the church. And what does Jesus do? He's the Son of God. We know that. And we know he's fulfilling, in the sense, that wisdom literature, that the Son of God, people who trust in God, sons, daughters of God, should rely on God. But sometimes, those nice people are a pain in our necks. They're obnoxious, the Book of Wisdom says. I think Jesus very often was obnoxious, and I think, God bless him, Francis is obnoxious sometimes. Because he's going against the ethos of the world, not only our church. He's changing things around, getting us to look at the relevance of poverty, ecology, the earth, relationships. Not getting ahead and climbing on top of each other as the apostles were trying to do as they're listening to Jesus, as some people in the church try to do as they gobble up ahead and try to get to the head of the line. Francis and Jesus are very much on the same simpatico level. Talking about relationships, he's more interested in how we treat one another. And it's funny, when I'm doing marriage therapy with couples, sometimes we're talking about relationships and all that, and that's what they do in session, no problem, guidelines, suggestions, and so on. But I send them home to not talk about the relationship, but to relate. That's the important piece for the Christian as well. Blah, 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 blah. We can all talk about Christianity. We can all talk about Jesus, but it's living Jesus. That's our heart and call and our challenge. To relate, not just to talk about relationships. And certainly, Francis does that. Relating and getting communities to relate to each other, to talk to each other, to create dialogues. Not one-man upmanship, but to see each other as relevant people. And then we go back to James again in his beautiful letter. He's talking about the necessity for relationships. How that comes from Irene, peace. And living peace in a relationship is so important, and bringing that peace into the world. And then we have Jesus again, who turns a society upside down. Well, I don't know what your reaction was, but I know the reaction of the world was, he said that, when Francis asked every parish in Italy to take in a refugee family. You don't think that gave agita to all the pastors in Italy? You don't think all the Italians, because he was talking to the Italians, he was in Italy, said, not in my church, not in my backyard. Does that sound familiar? And that's coming from the first person of the church, the vicar of Christ. And Christ does things like that so nonchalant. We think, this scene, Jesus takes a little kid in his hand. Oh, how pretty, how cute, Jesus. And we have so many pictures of that, so many paintings that Jesus hugging a little kid. Let me ask the kid. We don't know if the child, was a boy or a girl, but my gut is it was a girl. Not only did children have no place in society, women still didn't, at the time of Jesus, have a place in society. That's why they're so often scandalized when Jesus hung around with women and he allowed women to touch him and wash his feet and so on. So he's turning society's values upside down by saying, all of you guys, you've been with me, you're learning about my rules, my way to God. You can't get there unless you treat everyone like this child. And when you're treating this child in a certain way, you're treating me and you're treating my Father in the same way. And he hugs the child. Now that's like, go on the extreme. It's like getting a refugee right out of the waters of the Aegean and hugging him and saying, okay, we're going to adopt this child or pay for his family to have freedom, to have food, to have nourishment. He goes to the heart and he aggravates them. And in our world today, he continues in the Pope, who washes the feet of Muslims. Our Pope, who visits the elderly and touches the handicapped and touches the deformed and kisses them and embraces them. See the parallel? Don't get so caught up, ooh, how nice Francis is. Yeah, he's wonderful, God bless him. But he's imitating your and my Lord, Jesus Christ. And that's what we're called to do. He's not doing it in words only, beautiful joy of the gospel, beautiful encyclical on creation and appreciation of the world and ecology. He's doing it all in great words, but he's also doing it in action. Focusing on the elderly, the abandoned, focusing on those who are so often left on the periphery, the handicapped, the deformed, the ugly, those who pee on themselves, yes. That's our job, to care for them in our homes, institutions, places of healing. And Francis and Jesus both point us in that right direction. In the joy of the gospel, he says, we must regain the conviction that we need one another and that we have a shared responsibility for others in the world and nature, and that being good and decent are worth it. You don't get that in society automatically, do you? The need and responsibility to care for one another, and it's worth it, and to be decent and appropriate is worth it because it's seen in God's eyes. We have all these examples, but I wonder if we've really caught on as a society. Jesus takes this valueless child and puts it in the middle of all of them. Unless you treat this child as you treat me. His own words from Mark. Whoever receives one child, such as this, let me give you a little more color there. Such as this skanky, flea-bitten, thin, undernourished kid, in my name, receives me, and not only me, but the one who sent me. Don't look at Jesus as a nice storyteller and please with the nice hair and the manicured feet and manicured hands and nice robe that always match. Look at Jesus as the one who's turning society upside down and telling us how to value society, how to value one another, how to get to heaven. And that's not our goal. Let's not get caught up into that because that's too far away. Heaven starts here. How to value our life so we see in each other value that is almost transcendental, special, holy. If we see each other that way, we'll treat each other probably differently too. But yet, as I said, valueless child still goes on in our society today. 3 million cases of child abuse are reported every day. Every 2 hours, a child is killed by crossfire as victims of violence throughout the world. Every 4 hours, a child commits suicide. Children are exploited worldwide for forced labor and prostitution. Over $9 billion are made by traffickers who profit from selling children, as Pope Francis says, throwaway culture. And of course, trafficking is one of his other main focuses as he teaches us the value of the individual. Trafficking women, boys, girls for so many different illegal ways throughout the world. See how Jesus identifies himself with the least of our society? And Francis is asking us to look ahead and open our eyes to see each other, not to shove ahead and get ahead and who's going to be most important in the kingdom, or push ahead, which is the most important apostle, which is the most important priest. Jesus didn't care about that. He cared about our hearts. He cared us to focus our hearts on the loneliest and the lowliest of society. And he's asking us to live with the dignity of a Christian. And maybe we use James' own words as to what the job description of a Christian is. Removing jealousy and selfish ambition. Removing every foul practice, but accepting wisdom from above, which is peaceable, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good works, without inconstancy or insincerity, to sow peace and cultivate peace. We can get ahead on that. That'll bring us to the head of the line in following Jesus.